Welcome to the Dice Tower, a series of video reviews about board and card games. Here are your hosts.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Mike DeLisio.
I'm Z Garcia.
I'm Chris Yee.
And I'm Roy Kennedy.
And today we're going to be taking a look at a new game from Antoine Bauza, a acclaimed designer. This is called Oltréé. Is that how we're going to agree on the pronunciation on that?
Yes, we're going to agree unanimously for the country of France that this is pronounced Oltréé.
The designer's name, though, is Antoine Bauza. So
Bauza. Did I say Bauza?
You did indeed.
Bauza. See? You say Bauza, I say Bauza.
Bowser is the guy that tries to get Super Mario.
Exactly.
Bauza would pronounce it Oltréé.
Regardless of the pronunciation of both designer and game, Oltréé is a game that is based off of an RPG. French RPG, to my understanding. And this is basically taking that kind of feel and putting it into a tabletop game. But Chris, maybe you can give us a little more information on this one.
I'll do it.
Here's the beautiful game of Oltréé. Players will start here in the keep, or the castle, the satrapy, I believe that is called. Players will each have their own character, represented by a player board here, which will track your health, give you a special ability, and a special starting profession stat, which will help you do checks of those types of things when you have to roll dice later. The general setup here is that these are 8 locations around the castle that we are trying to keep from being in unrest. There are areas where we can gather resources here on the outside, and then we can build up buildings here in the keep itself. Depending on the player count, you might start with some buildings, and I'll explain what those do. Players have their own character boards, of course, and this area over here, this part, is a separate board. You can place it wherever is convenient for you. This we're going to be keeping track of the different types of event cards that come out, incidents, problems, and events. And then this here is what kind of drives the game. You choose whether you're going to play a short or a longer scenario by which one of these chronicles you set up. You will be, over the course of the game, flipping through this like a storybook, and that will drive the main story and determine what your main objective is. Over here is another type of card that you can choose how you want, which will give you some objectives to work towards. And if you put these coins here over the course of the game by completing these 3 objectives, it'll help you when it comes to the final confrontation of this particular chronicle. So what does a player's turn look like? First, you're going to roll the bad stuff die, put out a type of card, and then you'll take 2 actions on your turn. So let's see what that looks like here. So when you roll this die, you will either advance this marker 1 step, advance it 0 steps, or advance it 2 steps. Either way, you'll always resolve a card. So in this case, when you roll, you advance 1 step, and then you're going to put out this rumor, this incident card. But where do you put it? You determine by a die roll into one of the 7 regions of the map. This one's going to go over here into number 1, and this will become the top incident. You will then check to see, hey, wait a minute, there's 4 rumors of incidents going on out here, so this area is now troubled and will have some disquietude. So if we don't take care of that, the next time that this comes around here to this same type of event card, then we'll lose prestige, because players will lose if their prestige of the Ranger Corps goes down to 0, if their defense of the keep goes down to 0, or if they don't complete the main objective by the time the chronicle is done. The chronicle will be 5 or 10 chapters if you're playing short or long. And so, now that we've done the bad stuff, players will actively take their turn now. They can do 2 actions. They can do the actions written on their player board if it's an active action, or they can move, they can encounter a type of card, they can build more buildings in the castle if they have that option, or they can rest to increase health and gain more of these ration tokens, which can be used to re-roll dice. So, the first player here, Tamaris, is going to go ahead and move for 1 action over here, and she's going to encounter an event. And so when you do so, another player will look at this for you and read it off to you. This card will be resolved whether you pass or fail or whatever happens on the actual story of the card, and so then this place will no longer be troubled because it will not have 4 rumors. So the other player will go ahead and look at this and read it and kind of explain the story. Your path leads you to a place overlooking a small farm. The door is ajar and creaks in the breeze. You move close to make sure that everything is all right. And then you'll do one of these types of skill checks. This type of skill check is an exploration or navigation. How you determine how many dice you roll, you're going to look at 3 things. First, you notice that Tamaris herself has a navigation skill. Over here in the keep, regardless of player count, you will always have 1 of each symbol. So that is 2 of those symbols Plus, in a lower player count game or throughout the game, as you either start with some buildings or you'll build them over the course of the game by taking the building action, you will have more of these symbols. So in this case, there's 3 navigation symbols between the active character, the starting one here, and the buildings we've built. So you'll take 3 dice and you'll do a skill check in that skill. 3 of the sides of the die faces are blank. This one here is a success. This one here is an effort success, which means you'd have to spend 1 health in order to make this count as a success. So because I rolled this, I get the success side. Now the player reading this can tell you if it is a simple pass-fail, success-failure, or some of these tests might say, maybe you might benefit more if you have more successes on it. Some of them will have 0, 1, 2, 3 successes or so, because you can spend, as I mentioned, these ration tokens to reroll some dice, or player abilities might allow you to reroll some dice during a check, and you might be able to have more successes in it. So anyway, with this one here, success, we passed this type of test. The farm is deserted. You notice strange symbols painted on some of the furniture. This does not bode well. You decide to write up a report once you're back at the fortress, and you would gain some more defense in this case. Or if a failure happened, you would read what the failure incident was. Either way, this card is now done away with. We have successfully experienced that incident. Then the next player will go. On Berenice's turn, she will roll the die, advance it 1 forward, and reveal this type of card. This is called a problem card. Roll the die and see that it comes out. Hey, also to space number 1. What this does here, problems need to be resolved by the players. Sometimes they're for objectives, sometimes they're just to clear the board, because this space here could be taken as an action to, say, swap one type of resource for another, or to gain some resources, or to increase your prestige or your defenses. If this is covered up by a problem, you cannot you cannot do that as part of your action on your turn. This one here is a problem. There's a mild epidemic going around, and so you need to use your knowledge test in order to have 1 success. Some of these require 2 successes, and you can go ahead and try and resolve those problems like vanilla ice. So now Berenice is going to, on her turn, take 2 actions. She can move and she could try to do this type of encounter, or she could move and do something else, or she could build. Over the course of the game, you'll be getting some of these resources, which will allow you to build up these buildings, giving you more symbols in the different professions, so you can have better skill tests. They'll allow you to move up the prestige. They'll allow you to do all sorts of different effects, basically, that build up your keep. And over the course of the game, as you keep rolling this die and moving it forward, you'll experience event cards. Oh no, there's vermin! Either discard this type of resource or suffer this effect. These are usually instant or have some sort of lingering effect. And eventually, as you continue to take turns, you'll be resolving these incidents, resolving the problems. But then this marker will loop around back here. This will advance the storybook, and you'll see that this folds open like a story, has a beautiful piece of artwork over here, and this is going to drive the main narrative of the particular chronicle or the particular scenario that you're trying to resolve. This will tell you some story and then some instant effect, and you have a certain number of chapters to complete it, and it'll give you clues as to what is going to happen over the course of the scenario. Now, a few other concepts. If players work to rid an area completely of all of these rumors, and once it is completely clean, you can between having an area clean and having taken a building action to build one of these towers, whether a large tower or a small tower, by spending the appropriate resources, you put a tower out. This tower will defend these 2 sections here. So once this section is free of incidents, you can then mark this area as completed and safe. That's what these objectives down here are for. Having different areas that are completed and safe, and then maybe spending an extra resource or having certain types of buildings built. Once you do all of that, once you accomplish whatever is written on here, let's say that we had 2 areas that were completely safe and protected, a few things happen. 1, next time you go to add one of these rumors out there, if you roll one of those numbers, you don't have to add to it because it's already marked safe. The other thing that'll happen is once you meet these conditions, you'll take one of these coins and set it on there, because that's going to help you with the end game encounter. The more of these you have, the better luck mitigation it'll be for the final test. And then players will just continue taking turns like this, experiencing the stories of these incident cards, figuring out what the story of the main chronicle is, and working together to try and win the game. Now, as I mentioned, there are multiple chronicles that will come in the game. They're all differently named, and the first one that you start with is the short one. The rest of these are considered the long ones. Damsel Not in Distress, Underground Threat. So there's about 5 of these other chronicles that come in here. There are more of these objective cards that you can swap in and out so that these objectives will change each game, but they'll have the same idea that as you complete these, it'll work towards whatever the final test of the chronicle is. And then you'll notice that these cards are mixed together, blue and yellow, and depending on what objective you play with, you'll put a different mix of types of incident cards shuffled together. You always mix 2 types. So there's going to definitely be variability between how you can set up from one game to the next.
Okay, so beautiful looking game, clearly.
Sure.
You saw that in the overview. It has the Vincent Dutrait, did I pronounce that correctly?
Vincent Dutrait.
The artwork, which is, oh my goodness, God. I'm very sorry, Vincent. A fantastic artist. I think we probably all agree on that.
Yes.
Well known throughout the board gaming world. And component-wise, I feel like this is pretty impressive. The wood resources, screen printed, the nice chunky horses that represent your rangers.
Yes.
It feels like a deluxe edition, right?
It does,
for
doesn't
sure.
it?
This is
Yeah.
the only edition, mind you, but it sort of feels like it's been upgraded. You know, some of those pieces feel and look like upgraded pieces, which is nice. It's a very evocative box overall.
Right.
Even the box, actually, with its insert and the flaps, you keep things under these cool-looking, cardboard insert.
Right.
The whole thing looks elegant and, again, sort of kicked up a notch.
I think everything comes together as like a really great production with all of the different pieces. Just it looks amazing on the table. And I mean, there's nothing too grandiose, but it's just everything is just solid the way everything comes together and the way the art and the different tokens and things look.
One of the nice things I find is the incident cards, the rumor cards. I really like the little silhouette art on the back. It's a small I mean, everything about this game looks great, but I like the little small touches of that and the titles, right? You get a little name on the back of a card before you handle an incident. And it sounds like it could be one thing. It might be very straightforward. Oh, hooligans! Wow, there's gonna be a fight check.
Right.
But maybe this is an opportunity to negotiate with them, and so it kind of leads you to what it's gonna be. The art is evocative of that. It's in a good silhouette style. Yeah, it's really just gorgeous.
Game is covered in artwork. That's the other thing.
It really is.
The amount of artwork in it is stupendous. I don't know how Vincent Dutrait makes this much artwork for this game and so many others, but it's impressive.
It really is. And with all of those positives, there are a couple of things I feel like we'd be good to point out. I feel like there were maybe a couple of translation issues that I found with the cards. A couple of typos here and there that I get the impression that it's because there was translation from, I would imagine, French to English. It's not glaring, and I didn't feel like it was, every scenario you're getting bogged down in that. But I felt like I should mention it because it was noticeable.
And it's definitely not to the point where you say, what does this event mean?
Right. It doesn't get in the way of playing the game. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Now, speaking of playing the game, let's kind of get down to the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts, so to speak, of this game. It's a cooperative game where you're going to be choosing a particular chronicle at the beginning of each game, and that chronicle is going to lead you through a little bit of a story. Again, since this is based off of an RPG, it's kind of leading you through a story. How did you feel like that worked in the game? Does it feel like it's based off an RPG? Is the storytelling a big part of the game? Too much, too little? What do you think?
It feels like a story. I don't even want to say story-driven because there's one part. About a quarter of the game is clearly a story that follows one step after the other. Troglodytes attack. Great. Then when you finally get back around to that part, the book part, troglodytes double their attack. They're coming back. Great. Everything else going on is story flavor. It's not really story driven. It is not adding to that story. There's stuff happening. And the game is largely a reading and reacting kind of game. Which is, I think, a little bit of a, I don't know if it's a detriment, but it's something to be aware of. A lot of cooperative games are all about cooperation, about coming together and doing something together. This one falls way closer to the experiencing a story, experiencing an activity more than we gotta suss this out and figure it all out and sort of break it apart, put it back together, and that's how you win the game. That's how I felt about all that story stuff.
I felt like it was actually decently puzzly, like all the different stuff. I mean, the story drives along different bad things that can be happening and different things that show up. But for me, it was always very much a teamwork game of like figuring out, okay, that stack is getting too much. We have to take care of this stuff in this area or this province over here. And oh no, now this is happening. And maybe there's a different thing. It's like, well, now we have an opportunity to try to complete this objective that we're trying to do to help out to have a better ending for the entire story and things like that. I felt like the puzzle aspect of this was extremely strong, at least from my perspective. I love the story, and I loved each time we drew a card, we'd read something out, and normally we would take care of that card, but there could be positive effects if you roll positively. But figuring out which place to go and which thing to do, I felt was very impactful, you know.
That's interesting. I agree that I think there's a neat little puzzle here, but I almost play this kind of more in the experiential kind of way. Like I do try to solve the puzzle. I do try to put out the fire that's there.
You play the game.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's some good moments of choice. Do we take care of a problem card, or do we take care of the incident cards?
Do we get the resource so we can build the building?
Right. Yeah. They break up the different types of cards that come out, so that it adds to that puzzling nature. But I'm usually just kind of playing it, like you said, kind of experiencing the story as it comes out. I'll reveal this card that doesn't have to do with the main story, but I want to deal with some hooligans.
Right.
Someone's in the graveyard digging up treasure. Uh-oh, let's go take care of that because we're rangers. I feel like whether I'm focusing on the puzzle or whether I'm focusing a little bit more on like the story anecdote part of it, I think it comes together in a way that does make me feel like, Oltréé, we are the Rangers. Let's go fix let's go fix and go experience what it's like.
Yeah. I think for me, when it comes to the story element, there are particular chronicles where it feels a little bit more like maybe you're describing, where each time you're flipping that book, sure, there's a story, but it's just like a souped-up event card.
Right.
And a typical, it's like, hey, here's some stuff that's happening, but we're going to link these together in some type of a story. I think some chronicles definitely felt that way more. The ones that I liked the best are the ones where they had branches. And not all of them had that.
Yes.
That was my favorite element, and I feel like if they're going to add, and I've heard there already that they're going to be adding expansion chronicles to it.
Good.
I hope they're going to go more in that direction, because what that was cool was like, all right, then it did impact the decisions I was making. Whereas in other cases, they never did. It was always just like, all right, the princess is moving, right? Whatever. But where you're trying to accomplish things that you know are going to lead to a branching path that could potentially make things easier or more difficult for you, then I felt a little more invested in the quote-unquote story. But that wasn't in every one. You know what I mean?
Well, you bring up an interesting point. When you just said where you know it's going to lead to a branching path, and then you prepare for that. How did you guys feel about replayability in the game? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's not huge, I don't think. I think if you're going, especially if you're going into it looking for a storytelling experience, it's really not very replayable. I mean, if you're looking at it from a puzzle perspective, then it is replayable, and you just are paying less and less attention to those story elements.
Only if you skip the reading, though, then it stays replayable. I agree with you. I think I might say it's worse than you're saying. There's 5 of the big stories, and like the intro one.
Sure, the short
whatever.
chronicle. Yeah.
There's 5. And yes, once you've done it once, then you know exactly what the story will be, and but
you can adjust the difficulty.
You can
like
do that. You can adjust that sort of secondary thing you do, but I feel like the more you play it, the more you are aware of what those encounters are. You start reading it, and you'll go, oh, yeah, okay, I know.
I think that's when it becomes more of a puzzle. At least for me, that's the way I felt. Is because when I was going to those locations, I was like, okay, I'm good at combat. What of the titles on the back of these look like combat? So I was trying to go to those specific ones if I had an opportunity to do so.
No, I'm talking about when it becomes, when you get to the point that you know it's combat.
Well, I think there's at least a couple of each title, so I don't think you know exactly which one it is. And then it could be slightly different depending on which one it is. So it's like, well, I had this sort of opportunity, but then it's extremely a puzzle at that point. You'd be like, okay, we're playing with this deck this time. I know that it might have a little bit more of this. Maybe I need to pick a character that has that sort of thing. That's when it all becomes very much a teamwork puzzle, doing all that stuff out. I know you guys are going story, and I'm going puzzle.
Right.
But I love story in games, and I love that. But I mean, even from like flipping the chronicle, there's little hints in that chronicle that can give you like, oh, you might need this stat to be better. Right. You might need to build this building. Mm-hmm. We lost a game because we just barely didn't make a dice roll, but there were hints in that chronicle that could have led us to being more well prepared.
We ignored certain things that the cards were trying to tell us. Hey, you maybe don't want to ignore this, you know, and we were like, no, we're going to do something else. So I agree with that. I'm going to lead the witness here, if you guys don't mind a little bit, because you and I played this together. I've played it other times, but you and I played it together. And if I remember correctly, one of the things you were mentioning was that you felt like some of your turns weren't terribly impactful.
That's not...
Like you weren't doing a lot on your turn. I want to kind of get everyone's feel on that, if you don't mind.
For me, the thing is not about some turns don't feel impactful. That's certainly true, but that's true in most co-op games. It's about, in this game, you are doing, you know, you roll your die, you move, you read, you do the thing, and then you have two actions rather, and if moving is one of them, good luck to you, because in this game I always feel like I'm tied up, my hands and feet. My horse is tied up, and I'm tied to the horse. Because you can barely do anything, and to achieve anything that isn't, again, the main thing I think the game provides, which is read a little something, listen to a story, roll some dice, and then, woo, something happens, which is great if that's exactly what you're looking for, okay? Then you are accomplishing very little, I think. You're barely moving, you know. That's how I felt about that.
I had a character that could just gain resources as an action, so I spent a lot of the game we played just trying to make sure we had the resources to build the buildings we need to better set these guys up to complete the different stories and to be able to take over and build the towers where we needed them built.
So you took the same action a lot, is what you're saying?
I took the same action a lot, but that was by choice.
And I know, but that doesn't sound fun.
For me, it was fun because we were working together. I was still enjoying the stories that they were reading. I was still setting everything up because I was playing it as a unit, like all of us together. Not specifically for my specific character, but to make sure we were doing the best we could to set up to win the Chronicle overall. And I found that very enjoyable still.
I think that's a big thing, is if you want to feel like you have really fun turns in a co-op game, I don't think it's going to be this game.
Super incremental, this game. Yeah, it's very incremental. Now, you brought up that you had a character that had a particular ability. What did we think of the special abilities on the characters? Do we feel like they were distinctive? Were you looking at them going, oh, that's cool? I mean, now, the first time you play it, you're not going to have context, but afterwards, we always look at the characters and see what the special powers are and go, oh, did you have that feeling of, oh, this is a cool one? I can tell you I did. I thought that they all were people that I was wanting to play in a future game.
Yeah, I think so.
I think they were distinctive, and also like I got excited every time because I was always reading the cards for Chris. So I'd read a card and I'd be like, yes, it's an exploration check, and I knew Chris was really good at the exploration checks. I'm like, yes, we got another one. Get extra dice. I don't know. I just found that stuff interesting and exciting, and I enjoyed just reading through all this stuff and building that stuff up. And the special abilities were great.
Yeah, I think some of them are more what one would call fun, exciting, right? And then other ones are like, gain a resource for the group, and your turn is going to be 90% scripted at that point. Okay, we need a resource. Which one do we need to build a building? Foxtail, got it. And then I will move. Right. So it kind of feeds into, I agree with your point that it feels like you accomplish very little. I want to make this point, and then we'll go back to yours.
No, sure.
I think the compensating factor for not doing a lot of progress each turn is that not a lot of bad progress happens between each player's turn, right? This is
and
not
the
one
turns
of those,
are like quick.
Yeah. It's not one of those games where like I do one action and I move, and then all of a sudden the game does 5 things at us.
That's true.
It usually puts out one card, and the next person goes. So I think that game can move at a good clip, and that's I think that's what compensates for not accomplishing a ton per turn.
Yeah, not a lot of downtime, I guess. That's true. Not a lot of downtime between the turns.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, well, do we want to kind of give our final thoughts and scores on this? Do you want to lead us off, Mr. Garcia?
Sure. I have 2 big issues with the game. Though I like it because I've settled into this place with it where I'm enjoying the things it's doing, not so much what I'm doing with it, if that makes sense. It's telling me a story, I'm reading cards, I'm trying to put myself in the mind of the designer and the people who made the RPG, okay?
Right.
From that point of view, I'm giving it a 7. So I'm enjoying it from that point of view, but I have 2 main issues with it. One, replayability. I do think this game is going to dive off a cliff after I've played all 5 of those stories. I've read everything. There are going to be very few surprises, and I personally don't think the puzzle is strong enough to play and sort of put up with having read all these things already, just to do the puzzle part and read them again. This is not a fantastic novel, is what I'm saying. I'm not coming back here for the incredible writing. And the second thing, I think the game's a little languid. It's a little long for what it's offering. I do feel like the last 20 minutes of each game I've played, I'm sort of going, is this the last page of the book? Oh no, there's another one. Okay. Are we there? Oh, okay, great. That's another one. It sort of outstayed its welcome for me a little bit. But I do enjoy it, and I would say check it out, especially if you like beautiful games and you like all the little story bits in something like this. So 7 from me.
I'm going to go ahead and give this game an 8. I think that the game has a lot of charm, and what it's funny because I'm kind of sitting between, like we talked a lot about story, we talked a lot about puzzle, and I'm kind of in the middle of it. The puzzle's not an amazing puzzle, but it's enough there that I do, want to think about my turn and the group's turn and solve it together. But I also appreciate the story. I appreciate that, in at least the Chronicles that I've played, there were enough twists that in those last few page turns I thought, oh cool, this went a different direction than I was expecting, and it kind of kept my attention through the whole thing. I agree that in a lot of ways I should say, oh, this game feels a little long, but for some reason I don't. It charms me enough that I do want to play it. I would replay a scenario, but I think only if I was teaching it to a new person. Because I'm okay in a co-op game like this kind of taking the role a little bit of like game master.
Facilitator, yeah.
Facilitator.
Yeah.
There's 2 new people. I know the story beats, but I'm not going to allude to them ahead of time. But maybe if the story points out something like, hey, have you built the barracks yet? I'd be like, hey guys, the story's talking about the barracks. Interesting. You know what I mean? But like, but I think that there's enough.
Very condescending, is what you're saying.
Yes, you are much smaller.
I'm getting the resource and build the barracks myself.
That's right.
But I think that's where I would kind of replay this, but not with like the same group. Let's do the princess scenario again.
Which kind of leads to the RPG thing, right? I mean, like leading a group through it.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So for that reason, charming, delightful, beautiful, fun, 8.
I'm giving it an A as well. I really enjoyed just working together, and once again, the production is beautiful for this game. It's just cute going around to the different locations and flipping them over and seeing what happens and rolling the dice. Those dice can be punishing because there's not a lot of successes on there, and you try to mitigate that with making sure you're resting and having things to re-roll dice and giving yourself extra chances for that stuff. And some of that stuff can be pretty difficult at times if the dice aren't going your way. But I love how simple it is as everything goes through. Trying to gather the resources to give yourself better chances to mitigate those dice is fun. That's why I think it's a puzzle, because of all that stuff, like trying to figure out how to mitigate what's going on and keep those piles under check so that way bad things aren't happening and you're ruining the game for yourself even faster. But I really enjoy Oltréé, 8 for me.
So I'm also coming in at an 8. I feel like this game has a lot of potential. I'm actually hoping my rating will go up over time, and it's only going to go up if they continue to release Chronicles, and especially ones that maybe go outside of the box a little bit, because I do have concern about replayability. I feel like this is a game that they could easily do small box expansions that literally consist of a couple of decks of cards and maybe a few tokens. And you can maybe have 3 or 4 Chronicles still in a small box expansion, and that's going to keep me coming back, because mechanically I like what it's doing. It does feel like they're trying to take an RPG experience of checks and little story beats and put it into a tabletop. And so I feel like they did that successfully, but there are some limitations to that kind of way of doing a tabletop game, right? Because we do place a lot of value. These games aren't cheap, and you want to feel like you're going to get some value out of it. So I think that it's a decision they've made to try to reproduce that RPG in a box. They've done it, but they're going to have to keep up with it and kind of go in new directions for it to keep that excitement. Otherwise, it may fall off the shelf after a while. But for now, I'm happy with it. I'm excited for where it's going more than anything else. So I'm coming in at an 8. All right, well, that's it for Oltréé. Until next time, I'm Mike DeLisio.
I'm Z Garcia.
I'm Chris Yee.
And I'm Roy Kennedy.
Have fun mispronouncing designers' names and art. No, have fun storming the castle!
Oltréé!
Well, speaking of like you played it, Mike, show us how this one plays.
You got it.
You want it. You
This
got
has just
it.
devolved into.